Okay, so if you look at the house style, so whereas you looked, when you go back to editorial policy, you had editorial philosophy, your business objectives, your social objectives, your publishing list, the books that you publish, how does your catalog look, your branding, everything, etc., etc. But your house style is more practical in the sense that this is how our books actually look. So if you page through a book and you have a look at it, see what the format is of that book, see what the specifications are. If you actually go back onto the catalog of a specific publisher, you'll see that the books in certain genres commonly have the same look and feel, the same size, the same kind of, is it a photograph that they use on the cover, the page, the thickness of the page, the layout, the typesetting, everything. That would really be an indication of what the house style is. So it's not just about the specifications, the hard copy, the actual physical attributes. Even an ebook, as you guys have come to learn with Alicia's, etc., is that, even an ebook, I think if you look at all the ebooks of a specific company, it will look similar than, or similar in terms of their list as opposed to another publisher's ebook list. I don't know. It would be an interesting exercise to look at that. All right, so your house style basically is all about the mechanical aspects of writing. Okay. Why do we need this? We need this because it creates consistency. And one thing about a brand and about branding, and we're going to talk a lot about this in next semester when we do marketing and promotion for publishing houses, is consistency is key. And branding is also about repetition. So once you have that, you kind of create a feeling with people that they know what they can expect. Remember, one of the golden rules is manage expectations. All right. First one is know your audience. The second one is manage expectations. And that is really important because if now all of a sudden you're creating this beautiful cookbook and people are used to always just receiving cheap edition paperbacks from you, it's not to say it's a bad thing, but people will be surprised. People will not be expecting this. So how are you basically positioning this book in the market and how are you being consistent? I'm not saying don't do it. There should just be a good strategy behind that. But consistency, so people already know if I buy a romanza from Lapa, it's going to be a small, cutesy little book that has the same kind of cover design. There's a template-based design. I know the writing is kind of formulaic. I know there's going to be a happy ending. I know this is going to happen. But even the text, the size, what the size of the text is going to be, even without noticing it, you already know that the page extent, all the page extents of these romanza books and the single titles are basically the same. All right. So it's recognizable elements of presentation. So as I said, that has to do with your trademark or your branding. How do you basically go about this and tell people about this? All right. So style issues, consistency, as we said. Be consistent. It's not to say that there's no room for improvement or room for innovation. A lot of these books have already in recent times, some of these book publishers have started to rebrand. They started to revamp a little bit of their branding. Maybe just changing a little bit of a Romanza logo or a Mills & Boon logo, make it more contemporary. I know that they were at one stage, Lapa took all of their teen novels and they actually reprinted a lot of them with new, modern and updated covers because it kind of have to relate to the audience at that time. So if Instagram is a huge thing, that look and feel, the way people talk, the way people see things, those filters, all of those things, you need to take into consideration if you're publishing for that specific market and update your look and feel for that. All right, so consistency is really important, but not just for the look and feel, also within the text. They need to know, okay, it's stuff that you don't always even realize because we are trained as publishers and as language practitioners. Other people wouldn't necessarily recognize it, but that's because we're doing it so well. So, for example, you'll always capitalize these kinds of things, or you will also always, you will never use abbreviations, or all your different language dialogue within a text is always in italics or bold, or your chapter headings always have drop gaps. Those kinds of technical structural elements, the stuff that you had to deal with in second year with your design and production and typesetting and layout, Other stuff that you also need to know, that's more what I discussed now, is more identifiable visual features. I'll see here in my home if I have any very specific examples that I can maybe show you guys and send you photos or a little video. All right, so consistency is important. That's why we have style issues. Another thing as well is bias and parochialism. So what that basically means is, especially in a country like South Africa, and it's not to say or be negative, I'm not negative, but in publishing you have to be really alert and you really have to know what is allowed and what is not allowed. And people can easily sorry, I'm just looking something. People can easily criticize you for doing something specific. So if your book, it's different in fiction, okay? So it's different in fiction. But if, for example, you are like Mujaji Books and you do prefer to publish, your niche or your focus and mission and vision is to publish feminist writings by African authors, then obviously you will be biased more towards, women and feminist writing, because that is who and what you are. That's not a problem per se, but that means the kind of writing and the kind of text that you're going to have is also going to have that. But one should be very careful, especially with regards to religion and to politics, where your bias is. Some publishers may become labeled as oppositional publishers because they keep on publishing stuff that goes against government rule. I'm not saying Jacana is one of those. They do experiment a lot with a one-sided view, or sometimes both sides is displayed in a text. But yes, you need to think about that. Now, to give you a definition as well for the parochialism, it's basically a limited or a narrow outlook, narrow-mindedness. Okay, so you also need to know that if you are going to go out there and publish books, you have to know what your brand stands for. If you're very conservative and you're publishing for a very specific market, then you will publish those kinds of books and the text that will reflect that. You also have to think about, do you use swear words and curse words and things, and is there a lot of profanity and promiscuity and things like that in your text, or is it something that you feel this does not go with what we are trying to do? So your bias and parochialisms are very important. And then safety. I think another thing is also just to keep you safe in terms of, say for example, you do cookbooks and things like that. You need to know exactly what style issues are important, how measurements should be done. Is it the UK version? Is it the US version? If you think back to editing, copy editing in the second year as well, think about ethical considerations like bias, like gender stereotyping, all of those kinds of things are more of the, overarching kind of ideas and things that you need to keep in mind. But basically why we have house styles is in order for you to be consistent, to limit your bias and your parochialisms and your, skewed thinking or narrow-mindedness, to be safe, obviously, and it also emphasizes the identifiable visual features of your. What I just wanted to say is your author guidelines. That's just what I wanted to say. So sometimes when you have submissions, so you tell people, okay, so we have a submission period now, like Pan Macmillan has. They have submissions of manuscripts twice a year. I think it's in May, and I don't know if the other one is later in September or October. Then people have the opportunity to send through manuscripts, right? But by now you guys know that all publishing houses have specific author guidelines or submission guidelines. Go and familiarize yourselves with that, especially for your assignment as well for Section B. Go and see what is it that they publish, what don't they publish. Sometimes they're very specific to tell you, don't use punctuation and this, do this, do this. Some of them even have author guidelines that you can go and download before you even submit your manuscript. The reason they do that is obviously to save time and to help the people on the other side who will be reading the manuscript and going through it and seeing whether it's, good or bad. It just helps because once you've made that publishing decision and okay, fine, we're going to publish this, now you have to actually first go and correct stupid, small, little mistakes and errors and things that could have been avoided and saved a lot of time. if your author would have just looked at the guideline document and used it. Okay. It's also a guide in manuscript development that I just explained, and the copy editor uses it as well, because if a copy editor starts looking at a manuscript and deciding whether he or she wants to edit this manuscript, they also have to go through that guidelines and say, oh my word, does this actually adhere to our style? Or you do forget sometimes, oh, do we use abbreviations? Maybe you come across a text that with something in the content that you've never used before, or that you've never come, across before, then you actually sometimes have to adapt that house style and go back and insert it for future reference. So it's also a document. I always say it's not stagnant. So it's a flexible document. It's something that's kind of alive, if I can call it, in the sense that you can always adapt and change and work with it. It's not just you've done it once and now it's there. That's usually what happens, unfortunately, and then it just lies there. But people forget that now, especially with new media and with Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and hashtags and things like that, the way we write and the way the language has developed has changed a lot. So you need to adapt your house style as well. So your house style basically has style sheets. And your copy editor or your editorial coordinator or someone or editing manager editor would then basically put this together. All right, and that will be like a manual for you as a copy editor to work with and the author as well. It just helps. And as I said, you can develop it all the while as you go along, as you go through manuscripts, as you see actually how it works.